I died the day they chose me. The Emperor's angels descended upon our hive like a storm of gold and ceramite, their armor glinting under the harsh industrial lights. They did not speak of glory or honor. They spoke only of duty. We were not asked if we wished to serve. In the Imperium, service is not a choice. It is the only purpose worth living for. And so I was taken, along with 30 other boys from the brutal gang wars of Hive Secundus. I remember the last glimpse of the only home I had ever known. The spires of rusted metal reaching desperately toward a sky none of us had ever seen. The acrid smoke that filled our lungs from birth. The constant drone of machinery that lulled us to sleep each night. These were not things of beauty, but they were mine. All that I had known. All that I would never see again. The transport ship hummed around us as we sat in silence. No one dared speak. The presence of the Space Marine who stood guard over us was enough to silence even the most brazen of hive gangers. His armor was the deep crimson of spilled blood, adorned with symbols of war and devotion. His helmet, a skull-faced visage that betrayed no emotion, no weakness. We knew of the angels of death only through whispered stories and propaganda pics, but nothing had prepared us for the sheer physical dominance they exuded. Each movement was deliberate, controlled, as if the universe itself yielded to their will. You are not chosen for greatness. The Space Marine finally spoke, his voice amplified and distorted through his helm's Vox grill. You are raw material, nothing more. Many of you will die. Most of you will fail. This is not a path to glory. It is a sentence of servitude until death claims you. These were not the words of recruitment I had expected. There was no promise of power or prestige, only duty and likely death. I looked around at the other boys. Some were barely into their adolescence, scrawny things with hollow cheeks and eyes too old for their faces. Others were like me, hardened by years of gang warfare, bodies scarred and minds calloused. We were united only in our fear, though none would admit it. The journey lasted 7 days, though time held little meaning in the metal belly of the transport. We were fed once per day, a nutrient gruel that tasted of nothing yet filled our stomachs more completely than any meal in the underhive. We were allowed to relieve ourselves twice daily under the watchful gaze of servitors. We slept on the metal floor without blankets, huddled together against the ship's cold. The Space Marine never seemed to rest, never seemed to require sustenance. He stood vigil, a statue of war incarnate. On the 7th day, a shudder ran through the ship. We had arrived. The loading ramp descended, and light flooded the compartment, harsh and blinding after days of dimness. We were herded out like cattle, blinking and disoriented. The world that greeted us was not the one we had left. Mountains reached toward the heavens, their peaks obscured by clouds. Forests of trees, things we had only seen in picked captures, stretched across valleys. The air was clean, painfully so, burning our lungs accustomed to the polluted miasma of the hive. And dominating it all, a fortress monastery carved into the face of the largest mountain, a monument to humanity's conquest of nature itself. Welcome to your grave, the Space Marine said, removing his helmet at last. The face beneath was barely recognizable as human. Skin pale as a corpse's, crisscrossed with scars, eyes that seemed to see through flesh and bone to the soul beneath, a mouth set in a permanent scowl of disapproval. Yet there was something in those inhuman eyes, a flicker of something I could not name. Perhaps it was remembrance. Perhaps he too had once been a frightened boy standing before this fortress, wondering if he would ever see his home again. I am Brother Sergeant Crastus, he continued. From this moment forward, your past lives are erased. Your names are forfeit, your families forgotten. You exist only to serve the chapter, and through it the God Emperor of mankind. Another Space Marine emerged from the fortress, this one in white robes rather than armor. His head was completely hairless, his face a tapestry of surgical scars and augmentic implants. One eye had been replaced with a glowing red lens that worded softly as it focused on us. I am Apothecary Varn, the robed Space Marine announced. You will now undergo preliminary examination. Those who pass will begin the process of transformation. Those who fail will serve the Emperor in other ways. The meaning was clear enough. Pass or die, succeed or be discarded, the Imperium wastes nothing, especially not human life. Those deemed unfit for transformation would likely be servitors at best. Their minds scraped clean, and their bodies augmented with crude machinery to serve as living tools. We were led through massive adamantium doors into the bowels of the fortress monastery. The corridors were wide enough for 3 Space Marines to walk abreast in full tactical dreadnought armor. The ceiling soared overhead, every surface adorned with devotional iconography, skulls, and the symbols of the chapter. Servitors shuffled past, barely glancing at us with their remaining human eyes. Chapter serfs, human servants bound to the Space Marines, hurried about their duties, eyes downcast in deference. The examination chamber was clinical and cold. White tiles covered the floors and walls, stained with old blood that no amount of scrubbing could fully remove. Surgical instruments lined the walls, some recognizable, others alien and terrifying in their implied purpose. Examination tables with restraints stood in neat rows, waiting. "Strip," Apothecary Varn commanded, "completely." There was a moment of hesitation before we complied. In the underhive, nakedness was vulnerability, but none dared disobey. We removed our filthy clothes, the last remnants of our former lives, and stood shivering in the cold air. The examinations were thorough and humiliating. Every orifice probed, every limb measured, every reaction tested. Blood was drawn, skin scraped, reflexes hammered. Throughout it all, Apothecary Varn and his assistants spoke about us as if we were livestock, noting imperfections and potential with the same clinical detachment. Subject 17 shows promising bone density. Subject 23 has respiratory scarring consistent with hive pollution. Note for enhanced lung replacement priority. Subject 8 exhibits signs of malnutrition affecting skeletal development. Rejected, and so it went. Numbers not names, materials not men. 3 boys were taken away during the examinations, deemed unsuitable. Their faces showed relief mingled with shame. They had failed, but they would live. Or so they thought. I never saw them again. When the examinations were complete, we were given identical gray robes and led to a dormitory of sorts. Rows of narrow cots, each with a thin blanket and nothing else. No decorations on the walls, no personal effects permitted. A servitor stood at the entrance, its human components visible beneath poorly grafted machinery. Sleep. It droned in a mechanical approximation of human speech. "Tomorrow you begin to die." I lay on my assigned cot. The unfamiliar softness of even this sparse mattress disconcerting after a lifetime of sleeping on metal and concrete. Around me, the other boys shifted restlessly, some silently weeping, others staring vacantly at the ceiling. None spoke. What was there to say? We had been chosen, but for what? To become inhuman warriors in service to a god-emperor none of us had ever seen? To die in the attempt? I thought of my gang in the underhive. The Blood Scorpions, we called ourselves, a pathetic attempt at ferocity. We had fought and killed for territory no sane person would want, for resources so meager they barely sustained us. Yet there had been a brotherhood there, forged in shared suffering. Here we were competitors. Only the strongest would survive to become Space Marines, the rest would be discarded or worse. As sleep finally began to claim me, a strange peace settled over my mind. I had survived 18 years in the underhive, where most died before their 10th birthday. I had killed my first man at 12, a rival ganger who had made the mistake of turning his back on me. I had clawed my way to lieutenant in the Blood Scorpions through cunning and controlled violence. If anyone could survive this transformation, it would be me. I was wrong, of course. Tiber Jorel would not survive. He could not. I canceled my mid-journey subscription, because this AI does everything I need. I can upload my own. For a Space Marine is not an elevated human. He is something else entirely. Something both more and less than the sum of humanity's potential. The next morning came too quickly, announced by a deafening klaxon that jolted us from sleep. We were given 5 minutes to relieve ourselves in communal facilities that offered no privacy, then herded to an enormous dining hall. Space Marines sat at raised tables, consuming vast quantities of food with mechanical efficiency. We aspirants were directed to lower tables where bowls of nutrient porridge awaited us. "Eat quickly," a chapter serf instructed. "You have 10 minutes. The porridge was bland but filling, designed for nutritional value rather than taste. As we ate, I observed our surroundings more carefully. The dining hall's walls were adorned with battle trophies, alien body parts preserved in stasis fields, shattered enemy weapons mounted like devotional objects. Above it all hung an enormous aquila, the 2-headed eagle symbol of the Imperium, its golden wings spanning the entire ceiling. Before we had finished eating, Brother Sergeant Crastus entered the hall. His presence immediately silenced all conversation among the aspirants. "Today," he announced, "we begin to remake you. Your bodies are weak, your minds are untested. Some of you will not survive the physical conditioning required before implantation can begin. This is by design. Only the worthy will receive the Emperor's gifts. We were led to a vast training ground, an open courtyard surrounded by the fortress walls. The morning air was frigid, our breath visible in white clouds. Mountains loomed in every direction, their peaks crowned with snow despite the summer season. "Run," Crastus commanded simply, indicating a path that wound up the mountainside. "Those who fail to complete the circuit by midday will not eat today. Those who fall behind tomorrow will not eat again. Those who fail on the third day will be removed from the program." The path stretched before us, disappearing into the tree line halfway up the nearest mountain. None of us knew the full length of the circuit, but it was clearly many kilometers. Having spent our lives in the confines of a hive, none of us had ever run such distances. Most had never run at all beyond short sprints through underhive corridors, and so we ran. Can you tell if this was made by AI? Manageable, but the disappearing into the tree line halfway up the nearest mountain. None of us knew the full length of the circuit, but it was clearly many kilometers. Having spent our lives in the confines of a hive, none of us had ever run such distances. Most had never run at all beyond short sprints through underhive corridors, and so we ran. The initial pace was manageable, but the constant incline and thinning air quickly took their toll. By the first kilometer, the group had already spread out. The strongest pushed ahead, while the weakest began to fall behind. I found myself somewhere in the middle, my gang-hardened body serving me well enough, but my lungs burning with hands. Wet, my feet bloodied within poorly fitted boots. Yet I ran on, focusing on each step, each breath. This was not so different from the underhive, I told myself. Life there was a constant test of endurance and will. This was merely another form of the same struggle. When I finally staggered back into the training ground, the sun was directly overhead. I had made it by midday, though barely. Of the 27 aspirants who had begun the run, only 18 had returned in time. The others trickled in over the next few hours, their faces gaunt with exhaustion and the knowledge that they would not eat that day. That night, as we collapsed onto our cots, muscles screaming in protest, one of the boys failed to return at all. No one spoke of him, no one asked questions. He had failed, and that was all that mattered in this new reality. The next day brought the same run, but this time with weighted packs strapped to our backs. The day after, we ran in primitive carapace armor. Each day, the challenge increased. Each day, more boys failed to return. By the end of the first week, our number had dwindled to 15. Those who remained grew stronger, our bodies adapting to the brutal regimen with surprising speed. The nutrient-dense food, the clean air, the constant physical stress all served to transform us. Muscles developed, lungs expanded, reflexes sharpened. Yet this was merely preparation, we were told. Our bodies were being conditioned to survive the true transformation that awaited us. In the second week, combat training began. Not with the chain words or bolt pistols of the Space Marines, but with wooden staves in our bare hands. Brother Sergeant Crastus and other training officers taught us the basics of Imperial close combat doctrine. A brutal but efficient style that emphasized overwhelming force and decisive strikes.